Hello everyone. This class will be on nephrotic syndrome. Nephrotic syndrome is a clinical complex characterized by a number of renal and extra-renal features, and the prominent features in nephrotic syndrome are proteinuria of more than 3.5 grams or more, hypoalbuminemia, that is decreased plasma albumin which is less than 3 grams per deciliter, edema, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, lipiduria, and hypercoagulability. The initial event in nephrotic syndrome is a derangement in the glomerular capillary walls. So once there is a derangement in the glomerular capillary walls, there is increased permeability to plasma proteins. This increased permeability results from either structural or physicochemical alterations in the glomeruli, leading on to massive proteinuria. So once there is massive proteinuria, there is a depletion of serum albumin, because serum albumin is the main protein which is lost. Once there is depletion of serum albumin, there is a reversal of albumin to globulin ratio. So because of decreased albumin, there is decreased colloid osmotic pressure. Once there is decreased colloid osmotic pressure, there is extravasation of the fluid into the extracellular space, leading on to edema. So this edema is also secondary to sodium and water retention. Sodium and water retention is because of a compensatory secretion of the aldosterone. So this aldosterone, this makes sure that the intracellular volume is maintained. So when there is decreased colloid osmotic pressure, lot of fluid gets extravasated into the extracellular space. There is a hypovolemia enhanced renin secretion. So the renin is secreted, which makes sure that the aldosterone comes into picture, and there is sodium and water retention. So there is a compensatory secretion of aldosterone leading on to renin secretion, leading on to further events which make sure that sodium and water are retained. One more factor that is contributing to edema is there is a reduced secretion of natriuretic factors. So these natriuretic factors make sure that the sodium is there is some amount of sodium which is excreted, but there is there is a decrease in natriuretic factors, they also ensure that there is an increase in intracellular volume or by absorption of water which is accompanied by the sodium. So the edema which you see in nephrotic syndrome is of soft pitting type, and the location is periorbital and dependent portions of the body. Sometimes the water retention or the fluid retention is so much that it can cause pleural effusion and ascites. As I mentioned before, the major protein that is lost in nephrotic syndrome is albumin. So this proteinuria can be selective or non-selective depending upon the component that is lost. In a highly selective proteinuria, here the major protein that is lost is albumin, whereas in a poorly selective proteinuria, the major component that is lost is higher molecular weight globulins. Coming to the next feature that you see in nephrotic syndrome is hyperlipidemia. We have noticed that there is increased LDL, VLDL, triglycerides and cholesterol levels in case of nephrotic syndrome. This is because of increased synthesis of lipoproteins in liver, along with an abnormal transport of circulating lipid particles. Along with this, there is a decreased catabolism of the lipoproteins or the lipid particles, so that there is a persistent elevation in the lipid levels. So once there is persistent elevation of the lipid levels, this is followed by lipiduria, that is excretion of these lipids in the urine. So on microscopic examination, we get to see something known as oval fat bodies in urine. These are nothing but these represent lipoproteins which are resorbed by the tubular epithelial cells and then they are shed along with the degenerated cells in the urinary tract. So, these are nothing but old fat bodies which are seen in an individual with nephrotic syndrome. One more feature that we have seen in nephrotic syndrome is the patients are vulnerable to staphylococcal and pneumococcal infections. This is predominantly because of loss of immunoglobulins in urine. We have also seen thrombotic and thromboembolic complications in individuals with nephrotic syndrome because there is a loss of endogenous anticoagulants. The anticoagulants that are lost in these in nephrotic syndrome are antithrombin 3 and antiplasmin. So, there is an endogenous anticoagulant loss which will make the individual more susceptible to thrombotic and thromboembolic complications. So, coming to the frequency of incidence. So, nephrotic syndrome can be primary or secondary. Primary as in there is a primary kidney pathology, or secondary, that is secondary to any systemic disease. So, in children it is predominantly a primary renal pathology, but in adults it is secondary to a systemic disease, and the commonest systemic diseases involved in the causation of nephrotic syndrome are diabetes, amyloidosis and systemic lupus erythematosus. So, here we will be dealing with only the primary lesions, and those lesions are commonly minimal change disease, membranous glomerulopathy and focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. So, in children the commonest renal pathology causing nephrotic syndrome is minimal change disease. In adults it is membranous glomerulopathy, and focal segmental glomerulosclerosis is common in all ages. This is a table showing cause of nephrotic syndrome. The primary glomerular diseases which are responsible for nephrotic syndrome are membranous nephropathy, minimal change disease, focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, MPGN or membranoproliferative glomerulonephritis, dense deposit disease, and some other glomerulonephritis which are proliferative in nature, like IgA nephropathy. So, these are the diseases which we will be dealing with, whereas the systemic causes of nephrotic syndrome will be dealt with in respective systems. Coming to the first entity, that is membranous nephropathy. As mentioned before, it is the most common cause of nephrotic syndrome in adults. So, there is a diffuse thickening of the glomerular capillary wall, and what has been noticed is accumulation of electron dense immunoglobulin containing deposits along the subepithelial side of the basement membrane. Again, it can be primary or it can be secondary to systemic diseases, and that is known as secondary membranous nephropathy. Some of the notable associations or notable causes for secondary membranous nephropathy are usage of certain drugs like penicillamine, captopril, gold and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, and underlying malignancies like malignancies of lung, colon and skin malignancy, that is melanoma, are implicated, and it is seen in systemic lupus erythematosus. So, about 10 to 15% of glomerulonephritis in SLE is has been documented to be of membranous type, and it can be secondary to infections like hepatitis B and C, that which are chronic diseases, syphilis, schistosomiasis and malaria. An autoimmune etiology has also been proposed for membranous nephropathy, and thyroiditis is one of its association. Coming to the pathogenesis of membranous nephropathy, it is a chronic immunocomplex mediated disease. So, immune complex requires an antigen. So, the antigen can be exogenous or endogenous antigen, and the endogenous antigen can be a renal antigen or a non-renal antigen. So, Again, so idiopathic or primary. So the idiopathic or primary cause of membranous nephropathy can be secondary to antibodies to renal autoantigens. So this is what has been noticed. So the complements components play a major role in causation of this membranous nephropathy, and there is a uniform presence of C5 or C5b C9 complex in these lesions. So this forms a membrane attack complex. So this membrane attack complex formation is responsible for subsequent damage to the glomerular epithelial cells and mesangium and the epithelial cells. So what it does is C5b C9, the components of the complement pathway, they activate mesangial and epithelial cells to release proteases and oxidants. So these proteases and oxidants which are released by mesangial and epithelial cells damage the capillary wall, causing serious injury. So once there is damage to the capillary wall, there is proteinuria, and surprisingly what has been noticed is, since it's an immune complex mediated phenomena, there is a paucity of inflammation in glomeruli. So when we say it as an when you say that an immune complex is responsible for causation of these disease, we have noticed that there is a paucity of inflammation in glomeruli. That is, there is very minimal inflammation or no inflammation in the glomeruli. Morphologically, when we notice on light microscopy, the glomeruli are either showing diffuse thickening of glomerular capillary wall, or most of the glomeruli appear normal. On electron microscopy, you can there is a thickening seen in the glomeruli secondary to deposits of immune complexes. So, and it has also been noticed that there is a laying down of basement membrane in between these deposits of immune complexes, and this gives a characteristic appearance of irregular spikes which appear to be protruding from the basement membrane, and these spikes are best seen by silver stains which color the basement membrane but don't stain the deposits. So these silver stains color the basement membrane and they don't have an impact on the staining of the deposits, giving a characteristic irregular spike like appearance. On immunofluorescence, there is demonstration of granular deposits containing immunoglobulin and complement. Clinically, what has been noticed is there is an insidious onset of this particular disease, and they usually present with hematuria and non-nephrotic proteinuria. The course of the disease is variable. Generally, it is indolent, and when you are dealing with a case of membranous nephropathy, the secondary causes have to be ruled out. So that once you find out the secondary cause, a treatment for those causes can be initiated so that the disease, the membranous nephropathy, doesn't progress. So they usually present with non-selective proteinuria. So this is what has been noticed. They present with non-selective proteinuria and they do not respond to steroids. So non-selective proteinuria and non-responsiveness of the lesion to steroids is one of the feature. So in some cases there is a progressive sclerosis of a lot of glomeruli leading on to renal failure, and it has been noticed that women and individuals with non-nephrotic proteinuria are known to have a relatively benign clinical progression, and remissions are also common in such individuals. This is the microscopy of membranous nephropathy showing the first one is the silver A. The diagram A is the silver methenamine stain, which shows diffuse thickening of the capillary walls without a significant increase in the number of cells. So, the C or the immunofluorescence diagram shows a granular immunofluorescent deposits. Just remember this greenish structures, thickened areas, they are nothing but granular immunofluorescent deposits of immunoglobulin G. And the D and the diagram labeled as D shows a subendothelial location of the deposits. So, there is a subendothelial deposits of the material which is seen in case of membranous nephropathy. Coming to the next entity, that is minimal change disease. So, as the name suggests, there are the changes in the glomerula are very minimal, and it is a relatively benign disorder. So, it's a very frequent cause of nephrotic syndrome in children, and the characteristic feature in minimal change diseases diffuse effacement of foot process of podocytes. So, under normal microscopy, there is absolutely no change, which and the glomeruli appear normal, and that is one of the reason. That is the main reason. That is the reason for the name minimal change disease. So, the peak incidence of this disease is between 2 to 6 years of age. So, although there is an absence of immune deposit in the glomerulus, certain features point towards a immune mechanism for the causation of minimal change disease. So, and one more important feature in case of minimal change disease is it has an excellent response to administration of corticosteroids. As I said just now, there are several factors which point towards immunological basis for this minimal change disease. The important features are there is a strong association of this disease with respiratory infections and prophylactic immunization. There is a good response to corticosteroids and immunosuppressives in patients with minimal change disease, which is again favoring a immunological basis for this disease. Also, there is a strong association of minimal change disease with atopic disorders like eczema and rhinitis. There is a certain preponderance in certain HLA haplotypes which suggest a strong genetic predisposition, and it has been noticed that this form of disease is having a strong incidence in individuals with lymphoid malignancies like Hodgkin's lymphoma. So, that is one of the feature, and another feature that favors an immunological basis of this disease is presence of proteinuria inducing factors in the plasma or lymphocyte supernatant of the patients. These are the points which favor which favor an immunological basis for this particular disease. So, what happens basically in this minimal change diseases, there is an immune dysfunction. So, when there is an immune dysfunction, there is an elaboration of the cytokines. So, a lot of cytokines are synthesized. These cytokines damage the visceral epithelial cells. Once these visceral epithelial cells are damaged, it will lead on to proteinuria. So, there is one more factor which is playing a role in causation of proteinuria, because there is a minimal change in the glomeruli. So, one more factor which is noticed to play a major role in contribution of proteinuria. So, that is the defect in the charge barriers. Defects in charge barriers are responsible for causation of proteinuria. So the actual route of traversal of protein through the epithelial cell is unknown, but a possibility of transcellular passage has been considered. So you have something known as podocyte proteins. So there is which are involved in the maintaining the integrity of the slit diaphragm. So any mutation in these podocyte proteins can cause alteration in the passage of the protein or leading on to proteinuria, and the podocyte proteins that are implicated here are nephrin and podosin. These are structural proteins localized to the slit diaphragm. So the structural defects of these proteins can cause proteinuria. So even in the absence of an immune injury, if there are structural defects in these proteins, it can cause proteinuria. So nephrin gene, there is something known as nephrin gene mutation. So if there is a mutation in the nephrin gene, it can give rise to a congenital nephrotic syndrome. So congenital nephrotic syndrome of Finnish type, it is known as a defect in or a mutation in nephrin gene can cause Finnish type of congenital nephrotic syndrome with minimal change morphology. So when you examine the glomerulus, there is a very minimal change, and this type of nephrotic syndrome secondary to nephrin gene mutation is known as Finnish type of nephrotic syndrome with minimal change morphology. As I mentioned before, glomeruli are normal under light microscopy and there is no electron dense material deposition. Pathology is basically in the visceral epithelial cells and they show diffuse effacement of the food processes. There is a diffuse effacement of the food processes, often termed as fusion of food processes. So the diffuse effacement is also termed as fusion of food process. What happens is there is a flattening, retraction and swelling of food process of the podocytes. So one feature which you have to remember for minimal change diseases, it has an excellent response to corticosteroids. Whatever epithelial changes we notice in minimal change disease can be reversed with administration of corticosteroids. And these proximal tubular epithelial cells, they are often laden with lipid and proteins, and hence it has one more name known as lipoid nephrosis. It is also known as lipoid nephrosis. On immunofluorescence studies, there is no demonstration of or deposition of immunoglobulin or complements. In this condition, in this minimal change disease, they can have massive proteinuria, but the renal functions are quite good and they usually don't have any hypertension. They don't present with hypertension or hematuria. And the proteinuria in case of minimal change diseases of highly selective type. So the major protein that is lost here is albumin, and as mentioned before, they have a excellent response to corticosteroids. The downside to corticosteroid usage in nephrotic syndrome of minimal change type is the patients may become steroid dependent or resistant, but overall in this disease the prognosis is excellent. So one more thing that has been noticed is the steroid dependent disease, they tend to resolve at puberty, and adults are slow to respond to the corticosteroids, unlike children who respond pretty early. But adults, they respond slowly, but still even if the response is slow, the prognosis is excellent. And in this minimal change disease also there are association with lymphomas and leukemias are noted. Secondary minimal change disease. So minimal change disease secondary to non-renal cause, that is administration. It has been noticed in long-term non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug therapy, and it is because of interstitial nephritis. These NSAIDs, what they do, they cause interstitial nephritis, which can cause this minimal change disease, or it is an association that we know, which we have noticed with NSAID therapy. So this is the diagram depicting minimal change disease. The stain used here is PAS stain. So, it shows normal basement membranes and absence of proliferation of any form of cell. The diagram to the right is that is the ultrastructural feature which shows minimal change. So, or which shows effacement of the food process. The arrow that is pointing, if you notice carefully, that it shows effacement of the food processes and absence of any form of deposits. Coming to the next entity, that is focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. As the name explains, there is focal, that is sclerosis of only a few of the glomeruli, but not all glomeruli, that is focal, and segmental is only a portion of capillary tuft is involved, that is segmental. So, it is focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. So, it can be primary, secondary, inherited or associated with other diseases, or it can occur as a component of an adaptive response, commonly adaptive response to loss of renal tissue. So, primary is again, it can be idiopathic, that is primary idiopathic, the cause is not known. Associations include heroin use, individuals with HIV, people who are severely obese, in individuals with sickle cell disease. These are some of the associations that we have come across in focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. It can also occur as a secondary event reflecting a scarring of some previously active renal lesion. So, it can be a secondary lesion, and it can be a component of an adaptive response in the form of response of the renal tissue to tissue loss. So, it can occur as a component of an adaptive response which is secondary to renal tissue loss seen in cases of reflux nephropathy, hypertensive nephropathy and unilateral renal agenesis. It can be secondary to some inherited mutations. So, it can be secondary to mutations in podocin, alpha actinin 4 and TRPC6, which is nothing but transient receptor potential calcium channel 6. So, it can be inherited secondary to certain mutations in these proteins. So, idiopathic focal segmental glomerulosclerosis accounts for as many as 10% to 35% of cases of focal segmental glomerulosis are idiopathic. So, around a significant portion of this entity, the cause is not known. Then it differs from minimal change disease in with respect to certain features. These include higher incidence of hematuria and hypertension, proteinuria which is often non-selective, a poor response to corticosteroids and a very high incidence of progression to chronic kidney disease. So, coming to the pathogenesis, the pathogenesis is basically what you say is degeneration and disruption of epithelial cells focally. So, the epithelial damage is the hallmark in case of focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. There are lot of circulating cytokines and genetically determined defects affecting components of the slit diaphragm that we see in focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. There is hyalinosis and sclerosis, and this hyalinosis and sclerosis stem from an entrapment of the plasma proteins in extremely hyperpermeable foci of the glomerular apparatus, and increased deposition of extracellular matrix. So, this is what has been noticed in focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. Under light microscopy, lesions may involve only a few glomeruli. As it is focal, it can involve only a few glomeruli, and the glomeruli that are involved, they usually tend to be juxtamedullary in location. So, and other things that we notice in this focal segmental glomerulosclerosis are collapse of the capillary loops, increase in matrix. So, there is an increase in matrix, and there is a segmental deposition of plasma proteins along the capillary wall known as hyalinosis. So, these are the features that we notice in focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. And we have also noticed lipid droplets and foam cells. So, lipid droplets and foam cells have also been noticed in focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. Under electron microscopy, you can see a diffuse effacement of food processes in sclerotic and non-sclerotic areas. Immunofluorescence shows IgM and Ig3, which may be present in sclerotic areas as well as in mesenchyme. And there is a pronounced hyalinosis. There is a pronounced hyalinosis and thickening of the afferent arterioles. So, even the vasculature is involved in case of focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. So, with increased number of with a passage of time, if the pathology is not detected and not treated properly, over a period of time, there are increased number of glomeruli become involved and sclerosis will spread within each glomerulus. So, sclerosis which can be segmental can involve the entire glomerulus if the disease is allowed to progress. There is a distinct variant of focal segmental glomerulosclerosis known as collapsing glomerulopathy. So, here there is a retraction and collapse of the entire glomerular tuft along with proliferation and hypertrophy of glomerular visceral epithelial cells. This collapsing glomerulopathy can be idiopathic, but it has been documented as the most characteristic lesion of HIV associated nephropathy. So, this collapsing glomerulopathy is one of the most characteristic lesion of HIV associated nephropathy. So, here you can see prominent tubular injury. There is damage to the tubules with formation of microcysts. This is what has been documented in this entity, and the prognosis for this particular entity is very poor. It has a poor prognosis. There is a genetic basis also for focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, and that again involves nephrin and podosin. These are the proteins which are implicated in the pathogenesis of focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. This nephrin, which is a protein, is a key component of the slit diaphragm. So, and it controls glomerular permeability. So, any mutation in the gene encoding nephrin, that is NPHS1 gene, can cause an alteration in glomerular permeability. So, if there is and that is known as, if it is NPHS1 gene mutation, it can give rise to congenital nephrotic syndrome of Finnish type. That is one entity which we already which was already explained. Then podosin, which is another protein, it is encoded by NPHS2 gene. This is also localized to the slit diaphragm, and mutation in NPHS2 gene, it can cause a steroid resistant nephrotic syndrome of childhood onset. A nephrotic syndrome which is secondary to NPHS2 gene mutation will lead on to a condition which is steroid resistant. So, it becomes very important because steroids will become useless and the disease will be much more severe and aggressive. So, in children, this will manifest in the form of a focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. So, and it has been documented that it accounts for around 30% of steroid resistant nephrotic syndrome in children. So, steroid resistance in children, the possibility of this entity should be highly suspected. So, the proper relevant investigation should be carried on to rule out this entity. So, again, apart from those two, you have something known as podocyte actin binding protein. It is a podocyte actin binding protein which is known as alpha actin 4. So, the mutation in the gene for this protein can cause this disease, that is focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, and it has been noticed that the mode of inheritance of this form of disease is autosomal dominant, and the insidious there is an insidious onset. So, the onset is insidious, and there is a very high rate of progression to renal insufficiency or renal failure if this is the cause for focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. Coming to the next one, next type of mutation, which can have an effect on TRPC6, that is transient receptor potential calcium channel 6. If there is a mutation in this entity, there is an increase in calcium flux. So, there is an increase in calcium flux in podocytes, which can cause a lot of damage, leading on to focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. So, one feature that is common for all these proteins are, these proteins are commonly located in the or localized to the slit diaphragm. So, integrity of each component, each protein is essential to maintain the normal glomerular filtration process. If any of these proteins are altered, then it manifests in the form of proteinuria. So, there are other factors which contribute to the permeability defects in glomeruli, and it is because of it is secondary to a complex interplay between the cell and the cell and the cell and the matrix. So, if there is any alteration in cell to cell interaction and cell matrix interactions, that also can cause a permeability defect. So, any cell ultimately what all these factors cause is there is an alteration in the glomerular permeability, and the cell and cell matrix interaction abnormalities will cause defects in the podocyte adhesion to the glomerular basement membrane, making it more permeable and making it defective. Clinically, there is very minimal chance of spontaneous remission. So, and they usually tend to progress, and unfortunately the response to corticosteroids is also very variable. Luckily, children have a better prognosis, and around 20% of patients, which are mostly in the adult age group, they have a rapid course. So, they have a rapid course, and they will go for renal failure within a span of around 2 years. So, this is one entity that you should be very careful about, because the course and the sequence of events in this particular disease occur very rapidly, and around 1/4 of the patients in the adult age group can go for renal failure within 2 years. And even in allografts, even if the person receives a transplant, the recurrence rate is as high as around 25% to 50%. This is the diagram of this is the past staining of the lesions in focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. The left one is the low power view and the right one is the high power view. The left image shows a segmental sclerosis. You can see not the entire glomeruli is not involved, only few foci. A few foci are involved with sparing of a certain number of glomeruli, and even the glomeruli which are involved, they are not entirely involved, only the segments, only the portion of the glomeruli are involved. So, that's why it is known as focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. So, high power view, if you can make out, there are formation of certain vacuoles. So, they are lipid deposition which appear in the form of small vacuoles. So, this is the diagram of collapsing glomerulopathy. So, collapsing glomerulopathy, which is nothing but a variant of focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. It is a form or variant of focal segmental glomerulosclerosis where you can see there is a retraction of the glomerular tuft. So that is something which you should notice in this diagram. And the stain used here is the silver methylamine stain. So the periphery of the glomeruli shows there is certain retraction. So this is one of the hallmark feature of the collapsing glomerulopathy. And the eosinophilic or pink dots which are appearing in the center, they are nothing but intracellular protein absorption droplets. They are, just remember, they are absorption droplets. So this is about collapsing glomerulopathy, which is a variant of focal segmental glomerulosclerosis. So the remaining entities will be in the next section. We'll be dealing with those entities in the next section.